In 1987, Ronald Reagan and Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev signed the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty. This treaty required both the United States and the Soviet Union to remove missiles, nuclear or otherwise, between 550 to 500 kilometers. You can understand this was during the height of the Cold War, and in doing so, this created an era of de-escalation between the two countries. I want to tell a story. I've told this story before, but in telling this story, this is not a 420, even though you may want it to be a 420. And everything that I'm saying is absolutely true, and all of it is completely terrifying or incomprehensibly terrifying. Seeing that we're talking about the end of the world. We got here to this day, through dumb luck, not good governance, through dumb luck. Bad intelligence and all, we muddle our way through. But you must understand, fools, particularly those in government, can create horrors. Now, I say this because Donald Trump, this treaty has been wildly successful. And despite both the United States and the Soviet or Russia saying that both have been violating it, and they have for different reasons, but it's been remarkably successful. China was not included on this, but China is somewhat almost insignificant to this. The United States and Russia has, I think, like 90-something% of the world's nuclear weapons. If something pops off, it has to do with those two. The issue here is that Donald Trump has pulled us out of this treaty. Back during the Kennedy administration, we came close to ending this all. Now, I want to explain how close we came to ending this all, because I kind of want to get across that it's not necessarily that people make rational choices can take you into bad places, especially when the information that you have at your disposal is somewhat sketchy. That's even people who are intelligent and bright. That's not what we are. That is not the governance that we have at our disposal. We are alienated from the government at this point. Back during that time, and mind you, I actually like Kennedy. But the fact of the matter is, Kennedy nearly got us into a nuclear war. Kind of. He wasn't by himself, but he didn't help. Three things. Missile gap. Not so much that there was a missile gap within regards to the United States. There was a missile gap. The United States had a hell of a lot more missiles, and the Soviet Union thought that the United States was going to do a first strike. Trying to kill Castro, because in trying to kill Castro, Castro thought that the United States was trying to get rid of the country that he's starting, in which case Castro wanted assistance. And the third one has to do with stationing missiles in Italy and Turkey. All of these things, to some degree, are provocations. We must understand, in the same way that we have certain reactions to other people's behavior across the globe, they also have reactions to us. Sometimes we completely miss that. And during that time, that's exactly what was taking place. The intelligence around all of this was way off. To make my point clear, so Khrushchev sends a panic message to Kennedy. Essentially, Kennedy's response, they found out that their missiles, just to start, they found out that their missiles, being the Soviet Union was trying to put missiles in Cuba. Now, the United States did not know that the missiles were already there. The United States did not know that those missiles were already active. The United States did not know that if any attack was issued on Cuba, that the order had already been given in advance to have a full strike, meaning that that strike would have hit the United States, which would have clearly been retaliated against, which would have ended the world. The intelligence was completely off. Kennedy believed that they needed to invade. The United States wanted to invade, meaning the military apparatus of the United States wanted to go in. That would have ended the world. Kennedy, to his credit, called for a blockade as opposed to a military attack. You also must understand that the United States military at this point was calling for a strike, a first strike, with this idea being that because we have such an advantage in regards to the number of missiles, we can take them out even though they may take out maybe our eastern seaboard. They were willing to give away millions of lives with this idea of winning a war that didn't need to take place. One of the oddities in this, and the awesome part that I love about this, Kennedy, uncertain, calls Eisenhower. Now, Kennedy, during the campaign, had attacked Eisenhower for a missile gap that didn't exist. But he calls Eisenhower and he asks him, Khrushchev is not going to do this, is he? I heard the tape for this. This is an amazing tape to hear. And Eisenhower comforts the new president, or comforts the president, saying, he's not going to do it. It sounds so personable in the way that these two are talking. I mean, after all, these are just men, but at the same token, these guys are the presidents of the United States. Eisenhower was wrong. Eisenhower was completely wrong. Eisenhower could not have been more wrong. The order had already been given. The second point on this is Cuba. They kept trying to kill Castro. Now, if you remember, they tried to kill Castro like 100 times, like over and over again, exploded cigars, all sorts of stuff, in addition to the Bay of Pigs. Castro full well believed that the United States was going to invade, which is part of the reason why he wanted the missiles there in the first place. Now, the wild part about this is Castro, on this point, had two options. I let them take me down, or there's a massive military strike, in which case I take the world down with me. He chose option 2. It's hard to get this across. The war planners at this point had assumed that they would need to invade Cuba. That would have ended the world. Like, it's hard to really get that across. And the third part, the missiles being stationed in Italy and Turkey. Now, the interesting part to this is there was another fuck up that people found out later on. During that time, there were submarines, of course, but during the blockade, our military bombarded the submarines. One of them, anyway. Where I guess it got wind of it being under it and dropped depth charges. That submarine was nuclear active, meaning that submarine had nuclear weapons. Soviet protocol was for 3 officers to agree to it before they fire. It was one guy that chose not to do it. If that one guy went along with the other 2, again, we would not be here today. It would have been the end of the world, because the moment that they would have struck, the United States will retaliate it in force. We lucked up. That's all it is. We stumbled our way to this particular point. Sometimes there's this belief that because previous days followed, that the next day will come. That's not a given. And during the Cuban Missile Crisis, many of those people that were in association, meaning in the know, meaning were making the choices, did not know if the next day was going to come. I'm trying to impress upon you how dramatically close we came to ending the world. Khrushchev sends a panic letter to Kennedy, making a deal saying, look, if you take the missiles out, we'll pull back. Now, the United States didn't tell people that. The United States pushed this as, we stood up to the Soviet menace, and that Soviet menace forced them down. That's not really the reality of it. Fact is, most things in your life takes a certain degree of negotiation, and this is no different. The individual and countries are to some degree extensions of the individual, and not just extensions of the individual. They have to answer to a lot of individuals. And looking weak is not necessarily one of those things that's accepted. Khrushchev and Kennedy made a deal. Now, there were 2 letters that were sent, or 2 messages. The first communication was a panic letter from Khrushchev saying, you know, if you move the missiles, I'll pull back our forces. The second one was the hardliners, meaning immediately after he sent that letter, the hardliners were in effect. Kennedy accepted the first, ignored the second. Again, you could say that that's a good choice, and yeah, it was a good choice, but understand there was a lot of fuck-ups. The intelligence was wrong across the board. The United States, after the Bay of Pigs, was not trying to invade Cuba. Castro full well thought that the United States was trying to invade Cuba. The United States did not know that the missiles were active. Eisenhower did not know that Khrushchev was willing to fire. The intelligence was wrong across the board on both sides. I guess I'm trying to get a point across to you that Donald Trump ending this treaty. Treaties are about more than just the ink itself. They allow a certain degree of a space. You can say it's left. It allows the two countries a certain degree of breathing room. That missile treaty, eliminating missiles within that short range, instead of having 30 seconds to make a decision on what you want to do from your standpoint of your country and whether you want to launch. Do you launch? Do you launch? Do you launch? You got 30 seconds to make that choice on whether or not you want to end the world. Maybe you get 7 minutes. Maybe you get a few minutes as opposed to a few seconds. Beyond having a few minutes versus a few seconds, there's also this thing of, if I don't punch you, you don't punch me, and let's go about our way. Treaties and missile treaties are always odd to me because it feels like if you can get rid of that, why can't you get rid of the other ones? Like, if you could say that you can't use these particular weapons for war because these weapons are war crime, why can't you say all of the weapons are war crime? Ultimately, they leave some weapons that they themselves want to use in order to kill and maim and destroy, while trying to get rid of the weapons from the other. So they could say that a barrel bomb is bad, but a regular bomb is okay. I think all of that is nonsense. That said, in this very specific case, the United States is not going to give up its differential advantage. That said, we came vitally close to ending the world. Whatever I want to think about the Gipper, this is one of the things that the Gipper did that was good. And Gorbachev full well believed that it was a new day. Unfortunately, he was wrong. The United States quickly took advantage of Gorbachev being willing to make amends. I guess I want to make this basic point. We've come dramatically close to ending all life on this planet. And I'm saying we, meaning humanity itself, meaning just from stupid, dumb mistakes, building all of these military armaments, all of these weapons of war, and then building these things and pointing them at the other. A fool got in office because of an alienation from the country itself, meaning the country, angry at the establishment, wanted to find a way to punish that particular establishment. And Donald Trump rides in the office with a mustache fool right beside him that have always been against ballistic treaties, not because it was right, but purely because of an ideological belief system that might is right, and because the United States is in a position of strength, that we need to exert that strength on the rest of the world. We make orders and everybody else follows them. You must understand this immediately pivots the country into perpetual war. Other countries are going to want to maintain a certain degree of autonomy within their sphere of influence. And they are not going to take this thing of taking orders, especially somewhere like Russia and China or Iran. It's nonsense. It means that your country is perpetually pivoted into a position of war. We've come dramatically close to ending life on this planet. We have fools in office. Pay attention to your government. It dramatically matters. And just because, there is no genie behind the wheel. There is nothing that's pulling the strings. You have a bunch of lunatics and psychopaths that, out of hubris and brinksmanship, run the government, particularly in affairs of war. Pay attention to your government, whether or not you can do anything about it or not. I called before, I said, where's the anti-war left and right. Same question applies. Donald Trump pulling out of this treaty is dramatically horrendous. You must understand. And it's very possible that the reason he's doing this is purely because the United States at this point is just a weapons contractor. I mean, we sell weapons all across the world to despots and everything else. The part of the reason that he wanted Europe to up their military budget is because they're buying the weapons from us, or at the very least from the weapons manufacturers. That is not in our benefit. Why do you believe that a few weapons contractors who are selling weapons and arms all across the world is the benefit of America? It is not. That money could be invested into other jobs programs as opposed to this grim business of death and murder. Do you honestly believe that his intentions are noble? I assure you they're not. And right now, they're leading us into bad ends. What will take place after this is that China and Russia would immediately start a weapons, upping the number of weapons they have at their disposal. In the same way with Space Force. If you have a gun, to some degree, I may have to get a gun because I can't let you have a gun. I can't let you have this differential advantage in this particular way. I'm commissioned with making sure my country is intact. The moment that the United States gets rid of this treaty, China was never held to the treaty, but you ends and this weapons bonanza. It may be good for the people putting money in Trump's pocket, but is it good for you and the safety of the world? You are going to see a weapons upsurge in the number of weapons. I can't, for whatever reason, the word I'm looking for is out of my head. But you're going to see a bonanza in people buying weapons, meaning from the standpoint of the countries themselves, because they're not going to have a choice. Whether or not the United States or Russia was breaking the contract or breaking the deal, look, to some degree, I don't know. I mean, it's potentially true, potentially not true. I'm more inclined to believe it's not true. Or at the very least, incrementally true, meaning nudging around the edges. But you must understand, in the same reason that back during that time, Russia put those weapons in Cuba where they wanted to have a parity with the United States, or first strike parity. The missiles that the Soviet Union had, it's questionable whether or not those missiles could do what the United States kept saying they could do. They were looking for a certain parity. And in looking for that parity, they thought that if the missiles are in Cuba, that would stop the United States from invading Cuba and from striking the USSR, seeing as they can strike back. This is not that much different. We've circled Russia, and the missiles that we're saying are defensive missiles can be used for offensive capacities. It's the same. Same shit, new day. At some point, we need to grow up as a species. We spent $1 trillion, or under Obama, $1 trillion. What is it? Modernizing our weapons. That's $1 trillion that's not spent for things like roads and bridges and healthcare and education, things that you can invest in the society itself in order to make a better society. That's $1 trillion pissed away on trying to kill and murder and maim. It's time to grow the fuck up. We got here today talking right here. Dumb luck. Dumb luck. Pay attention to your government. They can lead you to bad ends. I'll leave this here. All right, guys. If you enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. You can always support through Patreon. I have a few more shows for today. Today was a treatment day, so I'm a bit tired, but my powers are relatively low, but I still have a few shows that I want to do. So I'll see you shortly. Thanks all.